There was a time when Pixar represented the pinnacle of modern storytelling, a studio that made audiences laugh, cry, and believe that animation could capture the full range of human emotion. Every release felt like an event, and each story seemed timeless. Yet, somewhere between art and algorithms, something changed. The same company that once reinvented cinema now often delivers films that disappear from conversation within days. That shift raises a question that transcends any one movie or moment. How does a creative empire built on risk and emotion end up content with predictability and decline? The answer lies not in a single title or a single year, but in the gradual transformation of Pixar itself. From a visionary studio into a controlled asset within a corporation where storytelling became strategy. To understand that evolution, we have to look back to when Pixar's imagination still drove its destiny, long before Disney's balance sheets took the wheel. Before the acquisition, Pixar was more than a studio. It was a creative revolution. From Toy Story to Finding Nemo and The Incredibles, each film defined a new standard for digital animation. What set them apart wasn't just technology, it was culture. The studio's brain trust operated like a workshop of inventors. Directors pitched bold ideas, rewrote scripts endlessly, and took genuine risks because they could. Failure was allowed, sometimes encouraged, if it meant finding something better. Their partnership with Disney in the late 1990s looked ideal. Pixar handled production and creativity, while Disney managed marketing and distribution. It gave Pixar freedom while providing them access to Disney's enormous reach. But behind the scenes, the deal was far from balanced. Then Disney CEO Michael Eisner structured contracts that gave Disney ownership of sequel rights. Pixar could make Toy Story, but Disney could make Toy Story 2 with or without them. It was a subtle move that gave Disney control over Pixar's most valuable intellectual property. That imbalance led to friction. Steve Jobs, who owned Pixar at the time, saw Eisner's maneuvering as a long-term trap. John Lasseter, the creative force behind Pixar's stories, shared the frustration. They wanted independence, but Disney had leverage, distribution, licensing, and the power to market globally. As Pixar's hits kept earning billions, Disney's own animation division was struggling. The mouse needed Pixar more than ever. After years of tense negotiations, Disney found its solution. In 2006, under Bob Iger's leadership, it acquired Pixar in a $7 billion stock deal. On paper, the merger promised creative synergy. In reality, it marked the beginning of a slow shift. Pixar's autonomy faded. The dreamers who once chased ideas now answered to financial targets. Creativity became a department, not a mission. And for the first time, innovation had to justify its cost. With Disney now in control, profitability, not artistry, would take the driver's seat. After the acquisition, the pattern was clear. Pixar's next chapter wasn't about risk. It was about reliability. Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Finding Dory. Sequels, safe bets, familiar worlds. Each one guaranteed box office success, and Disney saw that as proof of concept. The Pixar name itself was now a brand, and the brand could sell anything. But success can be deceptive. Inside Pixar, the creative atmosphere that once defined its golden age began to thin out. Instead of incubating new ideas, resources gravitated toward expanding existing franchises. A perfect illustration was 2013's Planes. Though it mimicked the look of Cars, Pixar didn't even make it. Disney's animation division produced it using the same world, hoping audiences wouldn't notice the difference. The goal wasn't to make a better story, it was to sell toys, and it worked. The film's merchandising figures were strong enough that the studio treated artistic criticism as irrelevant. That moment was symbolic. Planes wasn't just a weak spin-off. It was Disney's declaration that storytelling wasn't the product anymore. The brand was. Pixar's identity began to blur with Disney's broader machine, where movie releases existed less as artistic events and more as entries in a corporate ecosystem that fed merchandise, theme parks, and now digital platforms. This change didn't happen overnight. Lasseter remained Pixar's symbolic anchor for a while. But when he stepped down in 2018 after internal controversies, the last link to the studio's original spirit disappeared. Leadership shifted toward executives proficient in budgets and scheduling rather than story and character. The brain trust that once defined Pixar's creative process dissolved into committee meetings. At the same time, Bob Iger's corporate priorities became sharp and unforgiving. Shareholders wanted higher margins, and the company began rolling out waves of restructuring. Animators were laid off, production teams condensed, and the once lavish development cycles were shortened. Pixar's films, which used to take 4 to 5 years to perfect, were now hustled through accelerated pipelines. The result was visible on screen. Polished visuals, yes, but heart that felt manufactured. Interestingly, Disney executives didn't view this creative erosion as a failure. Internally, the math made sense. A franchise sequel cost less to market than an original and came with built-in merchandising. A weaker film might underperform at the box office, but still thrive as content on Disney+. It became a self-feeding loop. Fans saw artistic decline. Disney saw improved efficiency. What made it even more calculated was the studio's shift from creator-led to algorithm-informed decisions. Data, not daring, became the guiding principle. In meetings, executives analyzed audience breakdowns, testing character designs and emotional beats through focus groups before full production. The intuition that once drove hits like Up or Wall-E was replaced with predictive analytics and shareholder satisfaction. Internally, veteran artists began leaving. Some joined smaller studios, others went to competitors like Sony or Netflix Animation. Those who stayed often spoke about a gradual numbness, a sense that Pixar's voice had been domesticated. The company that once moved audiences to tears now tested every emotional beat for broad appeal. So why didn't Disney step in to reverse the slide? Because from a corporate perspective, it wasn't a slide at all. Toy Story 4, an arguably unnecessary sequel, still made over $1 billion. Lightyear flopped theatrically but performed decently on streaming, driving a spike in Disney Plus engagement. Investor calls praised cross-platform synergy. Creativity had become a controllable variable, not a pillar. Pixar had turned from a singular studio into a compliance unit within Disney's matrix, a consistent supplier of IP extensions, whose real value lay in franchise maintenance. Once you see it that way, Planes, Cars 3, even Lightyear weren't missteps. They were experiments in monetization efficiency. Pixar's purpose was no longer to pioneer new artistic forms. It was to sustain Disney's cash flow across separate divisions. What began as a shift in priorities had morphed into a philosophy. The safest kind of success is steady mediocrity. Disney had conquered innovation not by reinventing it, but by neutralizing it. Pixar's decline wasn't a failure to manage creativity. It was the system working exactly as designed. By the early 2020s, Disney's reality had changed. Streaming had become the company's obsession, and competition was relentless. Maintaining endless growth meant squeezing every corner of the empire for predictable revenue. Pixar, once the studio that symbolized unlimited creative possibility, was now expected to operate like a cost-efficient content factory. Its job wasn't to move audiences, it was to fill screens. At first glance, Elio looked like any other misfire. But inside Disney's corporate structure, it served a clear strategic role. A moderate theatrical flop could justify shifting more Pixar projects directly to streaming, where content didn't need to perform. It just needed to exist. For investors, that transition wasn't failure. It was proof of evolving priorities. When subscribers rise, no one asks what quality drove them there. Budgets were trimmed quietly. Where a Pixar film once cost over $200 million to develop meticulously, newer productions aimed closer to $120 million. The creative review process, formerly an open debate among directors and writers, became tied to executive performance metrics. Animation cycles were automated and standardized to meet pipeline quotas. The artistry that once required time and experimentation was rewritten into templates that fit release schedules. The Elio production shows how this played out. Early test screenings revealed negative audience responses to the film's tone and main character. Under previous leadership, Pixar might have used that feedback to rework ideas while preserving vision. This time, the response was corporate. Everything unique about the movie was rewritten. The character redesign was focus group tested, the story simplified, and the themes stripped of nuance. Several animators later described the project as an empty shell that stopped meaning anything. Disney's reaction? Approval, because the metrics looked cleaner. Disney's internal mindset shifted toward optimization. The company saw theatrical failures as useful experiments. A flop could lower expectations for future budgets, making executives look efficient when they delivered smaller profits on smaller investments. Each underperforming Pixar title subtly reinforced a strategic narrative. That theatrical animation was too expensive, and streaming was the future. Audiences thought Pixar had lost its creative edge. Disney thought it had found its financial justification. This approach also influenced hiring. Instead of bringing in visionaries with original ideas, the studio increasingly relied on adaptable technicians who could deliver consistent quality across multiple projects without pushing artistic limits. The culture of experimentation died quietly as risk became a red flag in budget meetings. Projects that couldn't demonstrate cross-platform potential, sequels, merchandising tie-ins, theme park compatibility, were shelved in pre-production. From the outside, Pixar's creative drought looked concerning. Internally, it was profitable by design. Merchandising revenue stayed steady, and Disney Plus growth outpaced expectations. Even disappointment had value. A weak box office showing generated more content analytics for recommendation algorithms. The company wasn't trying to make another Toy Story. It was training itself to control audience engagement at scale. And this is why Disney's executives appeared unfazed by creative decline. Under Bob Iger and later Bob Chapek, the company recalibrated its definition of success. Where Pixar once judged its output by emotional resonance, Disney measured viewer minutes, merchandise performance, and licensing deals. The change in incentives reshaped everything. Artists didn't need to be inspired, just consistent. Viewers didn't need to love the story, just stream it long enough to count. For Disney's investors, Pixar's creative downfall wasn't a warning. It was a case study in efficiency. Shareholders care about curves, not characters. What looked catastrophic to fans translated into healthier operating margins and a stronger pipeline of predictable releases. By lowering creative expectations, Disney had given itself more room to win financially. Even mediocrity, when managed correctly, could be monetized. So if it sometimes feels like Pixar's magic has dimmed, that's because it has, intentionally. The studio's purpose changed. It's no longer the dream factory that nurtures storytellers. It's the data lab that powers Disney's cross-media engine. What seems like failure is, in truth, the outcome of a corporation redefining art as inventory. While Pixar adjusted to mediocrity, its competitors evolved in the opposite direction. Studios once dismissed as second-tier suddenly began pushing artistic boundaries that Pixar no longer dared to explore. The clearest example was Sony Pictures Animation, whose resurgence started almost by accident. When Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse premiered in 2018, its bold visuals and experimental storytelling reinvigorated audiences' faith in animation as an art form. Sony didn't just meet expectations, it shattered them. Over the next few years, Sony doubled down on originality. Films like The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Wish Dragon, and the viral sensation K-pop Demon Hunters showcased animation styles that broke rules instead of refining them. Each project carried a distinct personality because the studio encouraged creators to own their ideas. Directors picked unconventional color palettes, editors played with frame rates, and producers embraced internet aesthetics without over-polishing them. Sony's success lay in its willingness to trust its talent. Filmmakers pitched passionate, sometimes chaotic ideas, and executives gave them room. Instead of chasing four-quadrant appeal, they aimed for authenticity, stories that resonated with smaller audiences but burned brighter. It was a freedom Pixar once embodied, but now lacked. Inside Sony Animation, creative risk wasn't management's nightmare, it was the business model. Meanwhile, audiences noticed. The younger generation grew up with streaming options and didn't care which logo preceded the movie. They gravitated toward stories that felt experimental, modern, self-aware. Pixar's polish began to feel outdated, a formula that once moved them, now over-refined to the point of sterility. Sony, DreamWorks, and even indie players like Netflix's animation division earned goodwill by daring to fail in new ways, something Disney now discouraged. This shift in audience behavior marked a generational break. Brand loyalty, which Disney had relied on for decades, weakened as viewers realized that creativity could come from anywhere. TikTok clips of animators dissecting Sony's frame designs went viral. Memes celebrated the revival of risk in animation. What Disney viewed as volatility, new competitors treated as vitality, a form of creative chaos that modern audiences openly embraced. Ironically, Pixar's decline helped clear the stage for this renaissance. The space once monopolized by carefully calibrated storytelling was reclaimed by studios treating animation as exploration rather than formula. While Pixar became evidence of corporate conformity, competitors like Sony became icons of creative defiance. And yet, from Disney's perspective, this wasn't cause for concern. Pixar's strategic role had shifted from leading artistic innovation to quietly supporting the conglomerate's machine. As long as its films fed Disney Plus libraries, fueled merchandising lines, and kept legacy IP relevant, the company's goals were met. The creative throne could belong to someone else. The profit margins still served the mouse. So while the industry celebrates Sony's creative risks, Disney celebrates steady returns. Pixar's visible decline looks tragic on the surface, but within Disney's strategy, it's an acceptable trade-off. They sacrificed wonder for stability. And in today's corporate world, stability wins every time. Disney's indifference to Pixar's decline isn't a sign of failure. It's evidence of a shift in priorities. Creativity used to be the company's crown jewel, but today, predictability is the safer investment. Every underperforming Pixar film signals to Wall Street that Disney's restructuring works, lower budgets, higher efficiency, and a streaming library constantly refreshed with recognizable IP. For shareholders, that's the story that sells. For artists, it's a quiet tragedy. Pixar's magic once came from emotional truth, a balance of risk and heart that made audiences feel something real. Now, it serves a new function, populating an algorithmic system that values engagement over connection. The emotional masterpiece has become the content cycle. The more predictable Pixar's output, the more stable Disney's numbers look. Mediocrity, when systematized, becomes profitable. That's the real story behind the so-called catastrophe. Pixar's creative dream didn't vanish. It was repurposed into a business model optimized for scale. The same characters that once symbolized imagination now anchor a strategy where data drives desire. The irony lingers. The studio that taught audiences to dream beyond the ordinary has become the engine of Disney's ordinary success. If you want to see how another creative empire is being quietly dismantled in the name of profit, watch the next episode. The pattern only gets clearer from here.